Right. Welcome to Global Radio and TV Live, and I am your host, Dr. Ravi. The number to call is 469 307 1642. That is 469 307 1642. You can also text your questions with your name, city, and country. The list of top 10 countries listening to Global Radio and TV Live changes on a weekly basis. The number 10 today is Ireland, followed by Greece, Singapore, Qatar, Malaysia, Colombia, Bangladesh, China, United Kingdom is number 2, and India, followed by number 1, United States. Well, if I haven't heard your country's name, let us know. We will add you to that list. Those who are familiar with this show, you know that we discuss here conspiracy theories and controversial topics. I, as a scientist, need a scientific proof of any conspiracy theory. Here we have discussed a subject matter that ultimately led into fistfights, including existence of God and aliens, not the illegal aliens who actually exist among us, but the space aliens, JFK assassination, and all controversial topics and uh, extreme skeptics and firm believers in all different subject matters, including these conspiracy theories. Next week, we have numerous interesting topics, including gun violence, Islamophobia, and terrorists among us. So stay tuned. Today, as I promised for the last couple of days, our to our worldwide audience, that we are pleased to introduce our next guest, who is envied by all American men, and he is the main reason why terrorists want to attack America. And the subject he is going to enlighten us with us is a controversial in many countries and a taboo in others. He's going to talk about sex and various subtopics, mainly pornography. Dave Pounder, our featured guest today, has produced and directed and performed in adult films for over a decade, with over 100 titles to his credit. Damn, 100, huh? He is also the author of a best-selling book, Obscene Thoughts, a pornographer's perspective on sex, love, and dating. Dave, welcome to Global Radio and TV Live.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Most welcome. Yeah. Listen, Dave, one thing that I was doing some research on, and I found your contemporary perhaps is Ron Jeremy. Ron Jeremy said that you cannot blame porn. When I was young, I used to masturbate to Gilligan's Island. Okay. So let's start with your name, Dave Pounder. I know you have been asked this question probably 100 million times. Is that Pounder is a family name, or you chose yourself?
No, no. When you get into the business, they have what's called a stage name that you use. Kind of like Eminem is Marshall Mathers in the music business. Because I apparently pornography, especially when I got into the business, was more taboo back then. Everybody had kind of a fake name, and I thought, well, let me use my same first name because if I use my first name, if I'm ever out with family and friends and somebody recognizes me from a movie and they come up and say, "Hey, Dave, how are you?" My friends aren't going to be suspicious. Where if I used a different name like Mark, and random people were coming up to me calling me Mark while I'm out with friends or family or whatever, it would be a little harder to explain the awkward encounter or the awkward moment there. So I figured it was good to use Dave, my real first name, and then something that was kind of a play on porn. And Pounder, I thought was funny because there are actually real people named Dave Pounder. And one day a guy actually emailed me and said his real name was Dave Pounder, and he's like, "Thank you for ruining my name," because now when people Google him, to find his phone number, like they find me.
All right, now is the Pounders your first choice, or did you have any other names that you guys
Well,
were coining
what's
around?
funny is my friend who actually introduced me to the porn industry. He told me that the name should be Pound Her and spell it Poundher. So I'm like, all right. And I made a business card that had it spelled that way, and it just looked really silly on the business card. So I ended up just printing new ones with the Pounder the way you see it now. And it's funny, people love it. I mean, all over the world, when I talk to people about the industry, everybody seems to like the name.
Well, there is one other important point which we are going to discuss throughout the show. And, as if men don't need any more excuse, you came up with a thought saying that why women should not worry too much about men having flings. Okay.
Right.
Now, if you go and tell women, that gives that much more excuse for men to be having additional affairs. So, anyway, notwithstanding the joke part of it, let's find out why do you think women should not worry about it?
Well, my favorite part was in your question where you said why men should not have additional affairs, implying that they're already having affairs and that they would
Absolutely,
be having
yes.
additional affairs, right? So, I mean, the question in itself kind of answers the question: is men? What I think a lot of women don't understand is that men and women face different adaptive problems over evolutionary time. So, for example, women have breasts, men do not, and the reason for that is because women have to be able to give nutrition to their babies and things when they're born. So it makes sense. Men don't give birth. Men aren't the ones that nurse the child. So men therefore don't have breasts over time, right? So and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Now, to think that our brains wouldn't have similarly evolved in a different way, I think is silly. I mean, we know that male body mass is larger than female body mass, which suggests sort of sexual dominance over women, and why we have these sort of coalitional groups now where women have male friends and stuff for protection, and why we need police and things like that. So you know in terms of winning in an evolutionary sense, everybody wants to get their genetics into the future. Now we're not thinking this consciously, but when I look at a girl and I find a 20-year-old girl more attractive than an 80-year-old girl, I mean, it's easy to look and go, oh yeah, she's more attractive, but why is she more attractive? And the reason is that younger girls signal cues of fertility. Women are most likely to be reproductively viable, if you will, in their early 20s, and this is why most men are attracted to younger girls. And waist hip ratios of 0.7, 0.68 to 0.72 typically signal fertility. Facial symmetry, youth, all these things. Um, Obviously, women who are 80 are menopausal and can't have children. So this is why men are attracted to that. And for a man, because the cost of us having sex is so low, if I meet a girl and I decide to have sex with her 5 seconds after meeting her, and I last 10 seconds and I leave, the my total obligation is 15 seconds. Where if she were to get pregnant as a result of the sexual encounter, now she has what's called a minimal obligatory parental investment of at least 9 months for the kid to be born. And obviously, she doesn't want her kid to die. So now she has to worry about protection of the child, resource allocation, and all these other different problems or adaptive problems that she has to face. So what women learn over time is that it's not in their interest to mate indiscriminately. If a woman in say hunter gatherer times has sex with 10 different men, none of those men are going to claim paternity. None of those men are going to want to share their meat with her or their resources with her, et cetera, because they don't know that that's their child. They don't want to invest in a rival male's offspring. That's kind of the ultimate evolutionary diss, is to be cuckolded. Um, Now, because men our cost of sex is so low, and because we have basically zero, basically or minimal obligatory parental investment, it's in our interest to go around and have sex with as many girls as possible, in theory, as many attractive, fertile women as possible, to impregnate all of them, because then the likelihood of more of our genetics succeeding in the long run is maximized. And again, we're not thinking this consciously. Men just think, wow, I want to have sex with her. Her friend is cute. I like her sister. It'd be kind of cool to have sex with her. We're not thinking about offspring and genetics and all these different types of things. But our brains are wired that way. It's the same way that when you see a snake, you jump, because over hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary time, it was in our interest to avoid snakes. We don't jump when we see a bird. We jump when we see a snake. Now, women, on the other hand, have faced completely different problems. They can only have a fixed number of children in their lifetime, whereas men, especially like Genghis Khan, can have endless. So for women, the cost of having sex is very, very, very high. Eggs are very expensive. There's only a fixed number of eggs women have in their lifetime. So every mating choice is very important. She needs to assess the mate's genetic quality, make sure that her mate doesn't have diseases or physical abnormalities, is ambitious and has these traits that would likely pass on to the child to maximize that child's development in the future. And she also wants to make sure that the man will stick around and help parent the child and help raise it together, so it has a higher likelihood of success. So women typically aren't interested in just mating indiscriminately. They want a high status male, and for them it's less about looks and more about resources and social status and ambition and things that
Okay.
get towards those things that help.
Now, you said that a lot of interesting subject matter. What is the evolutionary biology that controls the sexual behavior of men and women?
Why? Well, I mean, again, it's kind of
But
what we're talking about right now. So when we get to the earlier question about why women shouldn't care, is because it's ingrained in our genetics and it has nothing to do with how we feel about our wife. A man could be completely in love with his super hot wife. She's doing everything for him, and if he has the opportunity to have sex with another attractive girl without the risk of being caught or discovered, because then there's sort of there's an economic theory principle that's introduced then, a cost benefit analysis. But assuming he's traveling and his wife would never find out, men invariably do this, and this is why prostitution and escorting is so popular, and why females are always the desired target, unless it's a gay male, and then that's where the male escorts get their business, not from straight women. And women don't understand that for a woman to cheat, there's usually something wrong. If a woman is cheating, she's thinking, there's something wrong with the relationship. My husband's not having sex with me. My husband's not emotionally invested in me. He's not asking me about my day, how I feel, etc. He's not, investing in me. He's not signaling children. He's not buying me flowers, little gifts. He's not showing that he appreciates me. There's something missing. Women cheat. Where for men, everything could be perfect and we'll still cheat. So if women can just understand those differences, I think that would be beneficial. And the big analogy I use to see these differences between men and women is, think of male sexuality like a restaurant, right? You want to get into the restaurant business. That's a man saying, I want a relationship. I want to get married. But you're not going to just marry any girl, and you're not going to just franchise any restaurant. The decision to marry is costly in long term. The decision to franchise a restaurant is costly in long term. You got to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital startup costs. You have to give a franchise fee. You got to worry about marketing, employment, taxes, etc. And you're spending 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, often because it's your own business, at the franchise. Now, just because you own a franchise of a certain restaurant, let's just say McDonald's because it's a global audience, right? Just because you go eat at, Wendy's, or some other, Burger King or some other rival restaurant, you're just doing that because you want the variety. And women can understand that. Women can understand that they owned a franchise in McDonald's, that it wouldn't be bad for them or cheating on their franchise or McDonald's to go have a sandwich at Subway or some other alternative meal. Even though, Burger King could say, if it was anthropomorphic, well, McDonald's could say, why did you go to Burger King? Is my cheeseburger not good enough? Is my soda or pop not good enough? No, it's just different. It's a different environment. We don't want to sell our franchise at McDonald's. We don't want to go through the whole process of starting a new franchise at Burger King. We just want the variety. Now, contrast that with women. Most women I know like to travel. Or forget the travel. Let's go to a job. Most people, and if you understand female sexuality, most people, if they have a job and they're making a good salary, it's a short commute, and they like their boss and they like what they do, are not going to look for another job. So consider a woman or a person who's making $200,000 a year. Their commute is 2 minutes. They could walk to work. They love their boss. It's like their best friend, and they absolutely love what they're doing. And somebody comes up to them and says, "Would you like to make an extra $200 mowing my lawn?" most people are going to say, no, I'm not interested. I already have enough. The job that I have gives me everything that I need. There's no need for this extra income. I'm fine. When do people start looking for another job? When something is missing from their existing job. So if all of a sudden they cut your salary and you went from 200,000 to 40,000, if all of a sudden the company moves and your commute went from walking distance to 2 hours in rush hour traffic each way, if your boss relocates and you're reassigned to a boss who's mean to you and makes work unpleasant, then you start looking for another job. So assuming that a girl doesn't have a prior history of sexual or emotional abuse, which would then cause her to act out sexually for reasons we can get into later, but assuming she's a sort of a healthy, developed woman with no past abuse, if she's with a guy who's investing in her physically, financially, emotionally, and she respects him, his character, and what he does, she won't cheat even with the hottest guy that comes around, assuming she's attracted to her husband. Where conversely, men, like with the restaurant analogy, would absolutely cheat if given the opportunity and knowing that there's no discovery on the part of the female that could cause an adverse life choice on his end.
Very interesting. So what you are saying is the men do whatever they do is based upon their genetic predisposition from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and we haven't changed very much at all from that time period. And
Absolutely.
our goal is to go ahead and have as much sex as possible with as many women as quickly as possible.
In theory, and the
In
thing
theory.
is, it applies as well to dieting, for example. Like if you look at the top restaurants in the United States, they're McDonald's, Burger King, Subway. These are restaurants that have fatty, sugary, salty foods on their menu. Now we all know they aren't healthy in large quantities, but again, in an evolutionary sense, we needed sugar for energy, we needed fat for energy storage. We needed sodium. We needed these different items, but we weren't getting them in these engineered, concentrated forms like soda, right? They were in fruits, and you'd be drawn to the strawberry or the raspberry to get that, and your body's designed to want that. So in the same way, that you could say, okay, well, we haven't evolved much beyond our evolutionary past with respect to restaurants because we don't have salad restaurants or soup restaurants as the top 10 selling restaurants in the United States. Well, no kidding, because you're not going to change hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And to your earlier question, if a guy were to say to a woman, listen, I'm going to cheat, just don't care about it, that's like saying, taste sugar and don't experience sweetness. You're going to experience sweetness if you taste sugar, even if you understand the chemical properties of sugar. And a woman or a man is going to experience jealousy when they discover a sexual infidelity. So what I tell people is the idea isn't so much not to cheat, especially if you're a man where it's genetic and wired, because you're going to cheat anyways, but women are going to care anyways. So the more important thing is to focus on not letting that infidelity be discovered. And the analogy there is, think about poison, right? For sake of analogy, let's say that I give you some food and I tell you that it has poison in it. And for sake of argument, you're willing to eat that food and die, right? But I actually don't put poison in it. You believe there's poison in it, but there's no poison. You eat the food, you're not going to die because there's no poison in it. The agent of your death isn't whether you believe there's poison, but whether there actually is poison. Now, conversely, let's say I give you food and you don't believe you're being poisoned, and I put poison in the food. You have no knowledge of the poison. Then you will die. Again, the agent of the outcome is the poison and not the belief in the poison. Now contrast that with infidelity. If a man is married to a wife and he goes off and he cheats every week for the rest of his life, so he's had thousands of extra pair partners, and his wife never discovers the infidelity, her relationship happiness is completely sound. It's not impacted. It's not like his penis entered the vaginal plane of another woman, and as a result of the actual infidelity, like with the poison analogy, she suffered a heart attack or she had a stroke, right? It's only if she believes that. And then contrast the other argument, which is, let's say a man has always been faithful. He just wanted to, control his urges forever and just was never cheated, and said, just for a scientific psychological experiment, I'm going to tell my wife that I had 7 affairs with women over 20 years of marriage. So he tells her this, even though he's never had sex. She is going to cry. She's going to be, how could you? I don't trust you. And more than likely want to have a divorce. Even though the guy never cheated, she just believes he cheated. So the adverse consequence for women isn't the actual infidelity of the man. It's the belief or the discovery of the infidelity. And the man can mitigate that by cheating discreetly or being cognizant of her feelings. And I think if women take the time to read the academic literature about male and female sexuality, they'll realize that it has nothing to do with her, just like with the restaurant analogy, it has nothing to do with the franchise. And she won't do things like check his phone or ask other questions if he says, I have to work late on Friday. Just go, okay, when will you be home? Now, what are you doing? Who are you with? Why are you working late? Not checking his phone when he's on the bathroom, because you're not going to like what you find. And I think if people want to have a happy relationship, they should really understand the other gender through the scientific literature, not through like these dating coaches that just feel out their thing. And then
So,
I think they will have much better relationships.
so the message that I'm getting from this is, if you are a man, if you are going to cheat, don't get caught.
Correct.
Is that all it is?
Well, it's true. But here's the thing. That's what's happening. I mean, think about your earlier question when you said, pornography or the book will make people have additional affairs. So you were already implying that they're having affairs, and I'm sure you're already implying that they're not telling their spouses. So this is already common knowledge. I'm just kind of putting it out there and trying to get people to think
Okay.
about it more so that relationships can stay intact. I think it's really sad when I see a woman who's married to a man she loves and she has a family with him and a nice house and a nice car. She discovered he had sex with a secretary. She files for divorce. Now she's living in an apartment. She's splitting custody of her kids, and she's unhappy because she thinks it has to do with her when it doesn't. Because she's thinking, well, I wouldn't have cheated unless there was something wrong with the relationships, or there must be something wrong with me. He doesn't love me. He doesn't find me attractive, and none of that could be further from
True.
the truth.
So you are, based upon your analysis, an ideal wife would be Hillary Clinton, because she's still staying with her husband, knowingly well that he may have had numerous affairs.
Well, now you're getting into a different ester here. Now you're talking about mate replacement cost. Okay, so Hillary Clinton has been around Bill Clinton, who's very wealthy, very educated, as is Hillary Clinton. But as women age, their mate value declines. I mean, most successful men have given an opportunity to select from a pool of 20 or 30-year-old women versus 40 or 50-year-old women, all variables equal, controlling for education and things like that, are going to go for the younger woman. So when Hillary discovered the infidelity, let's say she was in her 40s, I'm assuming, it was much more difficult for her to secure a high value mate at that time, another guy like Bill Clinton. And what you'll find is when women discover that their partner had an infidelity, if his mate value is hard to replace, if she's dating a physician or an attorney or someone of high social status, she's more likely to accept it. Whereas if Bill Clinton were a McDonald's fast food worker or an auto mechanic, it's very unlikely she would have stayed. And conversely, it works the same way for men. If men have a very attractive girlfriend that's desired by many other men in society, and he discovers that she cheated on him, he's hurt, but he's still likely to stay with her because it's unlikely that he'll attain another mate of that mate value.
Well,
Where if the wife is unattractive, he's more likely to leave.
well, there is maybe one slight correction to this. Bill Clinton had a lot of power. He may not be wealthy. Now, if Bill Clinton had 250, $500 million, then it's worth divorcing him, right?
Well, it depends because remember,
That's the
females want
economic consequences of.
true, but remember, females want social status, number one, not just resources, but social status because they're correlated. So even if he's the president and he's not making a ton of money, he's still the president.
Yes.
It's kind of like when women hook up with like the lead singer of a band, and maybe the band isn't successful yet, but they're really into that band and they like the band. But the thing is women don't want just money. Okay, so if a low status male, if a mechanic wins the lottery, he wins $3 million in a Powerball lottery in the United States. He might be able to pay for attractive girls to have sex with him, but most high quality women don't want to be with him as their primary mate. So and even if an ambitious high status guy like Bill Clinton were to lose all of his money, most women would still date him because he possesses ambition, and again, he has social status and social networks that are able to help him reestablish it and regain power and success within that society, which he's more than likely to do.
So,
now, back to your earlier point, though,
in other words,
about when you talk about how men are going to cheat anyways, or that because it's biological that women should just accept it. Think about, again, back to the food analogy. If you're a personal trainer and you're obsessed with your health and you're eating low carb and fruits and vegetables and you're exercising every day, right? Think of that as a monogamous relationship. If that personal trainer has a cheeseburger twice a year, okay, maybe a cookie once a year, he technically cheated 3 times in his diet. He's actually good at nutrition. He's actually very good at nutrition. So if a man only cheats on his wife, a few times during the marriage, he's actually good at monogamy. A lot of women see monogamy as this binary 0-1 transaction. He cheated on me at any point or he didn't. And I think that's unrealistic. I mean, I think there are people who eat like garbage every day, like me. I eat cheeseburgers and burritos with really and just complete disregard for my health because it tastes good. And there's other people who eat very healthy. But I eat healthy on occasion, and my friends that are super healthy eat poor on occasion. And there are husbands who are married to their wives and cheat all the time. And there are people who are consider themselves monogamous but had a couple indiscretions. But either way, you're really going against the grain. I mean, we are omnivores. Um, and just because we're omnivores doesn't mean that if someone chooses to eat vegetarian, that all of a sudden meat doesn't smell good. That's what Christopher Ryan says. And it's the same thing. I mean, just because you choose to be monogamous, especially as a male, doesn't mean that you're not going to find other women appealing. And getting back to the poison analogy, the reason why most men cheat is because the actual infidelity doesn't hurt the woman. I mean, if you're cheating on your diet and you actually eat, poisonous food or eat bad food for you, you're actually harming your body. But when you actually have an indiscretion, as a man, you're actually getting positive reinforcement. And it's only negative if the women were to discover it. And most sophisticated women I know will say to their husbands, listen, I know how men are. I don't want to know. I don't have any suspicion to believe it, but just don't. Try not to put it in my face. I think most intelligent women do that.
Okay, now here is the question. You said that the women should not worry. Did you tell this to, as a poll, 100 women and see what the reaction was?
Yeah, well, they're going to say, I mean, I didn't specifically, do a 100 this, 100 that, but I can tell you what they're going to say from having these conversations is, if the bulk of American women are going to say, if I discover my husband cheating, I'm going to break up with him. He doesn't deserve me. He doesn't love me. And again, it's all of this media, the American media, throwing these romance novels and these chick flicks at women. And it's no different from men growing up in a pornographic society and saying, I watch these porn videos where the girls are having threesomes with their best friends and their friends' moms and all these things, and that's what I want, even though it isn't really realistic. Most women don't want to have group orgy sex with their male friends, even though the men really get off on watching that in porn. And most men aren't really giving this sort of storytell romantic life. I mean, every romance novel depicts a male primary character who is tall, successful, and has some kind of social status. If you look at this big movie in the U.S., 50 Shades of Grey, the guy's a billionaire, right? I saw a funny spoof once that said 50 Shades of Grey, if the guy wasn't a billionaire, it would be a Criminal Minds episode, right? But because the guy's rich, all of a sudden it's appealing to women. So I think in the same way that a lot of people will say that pornography objectifies women or gives men unrealistic expectations of how women should look and behave sexually, I argue that mainstream media, romance novels, chick flicks, and even movies like 50 Shades of Grey, give women an unrealistic expectation about how much money men should earn economically, about their social status in society, and even balancing that with family lifetime. I mean, these women in these or these guys in the chick flicks and romance novels, they're multimillionaires, they have great jobs, yet they have 40 plus hours a week to hang out with their wives, and they're never getting calls all day long and being on video conferences, which is what most very wealthy people are doing most of the time. So it's an equally ridiculous premise, even especially considering in the United States, the average per capita income is $40,000. And if I tell a woman, let me introduce you to this guy, he makes about 40 grand. She's like, I'm not interested. Do you know any lawyers, doctors, or people who are more ambitious? And to a man, if you say to your friend, hey, I want to hook you up with my friend, and she's a size 12, even though that's probably around, I would say size 10 or whatever, it's probably around the average American woman size, he's going to say, I'm not interested. Do you know anybody that's a size 3 or a size 2? So it's these disparities are so obvious in society. It's just getting people to acknowledge them and then developing a plan where both genders can be happy. Okay, even though I'm advocating that men should not deny their urges and cheat, I'm also saying be respectful of your wife's feelings. Don't let her find out. Have her feel appreciated. All these things that women want. Women want to be desired. They want to be loved. They want to be cuddled. Do those things. I'm not suggesting at all otherwise. And you don't. I'm not saying that you have to cheat. I'm just saying if you do cheat, don't feel guilty about it because it's completely natural and most men do it. And if you're on the receiving end as a woman, don't take it personally. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. Now there are men who have affairs because they're not happily married, but having an affair and having a sexual indiscretion are two completely different things.
All right, let's come back to you. Over the years, the porn industry had all kinds of ups and downs. One of the problems that they faced was the sexually transmitted diseases. And that had a significant effect on when the AIDS was a serious problem in the 1980s. Now, did you act in any movies in the 80s?
No, I got into the business in 2001.
2001. So you by the time you got in there, they already knew everything about AIDS.
Correct.
How did you get into this business? Is it just walked over to some studio in Hollywood and say, okay, I'm ready? How did you start
that's what every guy, if that were the case, there would be porn of all men and no women. I know it's not that easy. I mean, basically, what happened was I was dating a girl for 6 years, and she wanted to get married, but I had this. This is before I knew anything about male female sexuality, and I just knew that I wanted to have sex with other girls, and I thought it was a Dave thing. I didn't realize it was a guy thing. So I said I need to just break up with her. You know, I've been with her for 6 years. Let her find her guy that wants to be monogamous, and I'll find my girl who wants to have multiple partners like me. So I break up with her, but before we broke up, she got me a subscription to Hustler magazine, which is a big nude magazine in the U.S. So I'm reading Hustler magazine, and I read this article about a swingers club. It was in a neighboring neighborhood, the adjacent neighborhood next to me. And I'm like, really? These sex clubs exist? This seems bizarre. It's probably a joke, but I'm like, I didn't go right away because I was with her. We spent all our time together. But when I got out of graduate school, I went to the swingers club finally, and I met this couple, and I was into the wife, so I just started making out with her, and I had sex with her on the couch. And
But
yeah,
you
everybody was
didn't have
watching.
in a swingers club usually have partners. So but you went there
No,
by
and
yourself.
some of these clubs will let you go as guys because there are certain parties where couples like to watch their wife with another guy or have a threesome with another guy. It's not always about a couple, so there's always select guys. So you interview. Back in the day, you'd actually meet with somebody from the club and you would interview them. You know, you talk with them and they would say, "Do we want to bring this guy to the club? Is he good looking? Is he personable? Is he respectful? Are the couples going to like him?" So I go to the swingers club and I start making out with this wife and have sex with her on the couch, and everybody's watching, and I really don't care. I'm just so happy to be having sex. At the end of the encounter, a guy comes up to me and he's like, "Have you ever thought about making movies?" And I said, "Well, why me? I mean, there's plenty of guys here." He's like, "Yeah, well, I don't know if you noticed, but most people get a private room or they go home. They don't do it right in the middle of the couch in front of everybody. The fact that you can perform in front of a bunch of people is difficult to find, and we'd like to try you out. I have a friend in the porn business in Los Angeles, which is about an hour away. If you want to try it." So I said, "Sure." So I went to the set, and basically I was an extra. I was playing the role of a husband because this porn scout was at the swingers club to try to recruit real couples, so that they could have real couples watching their wives have sex with porn stars. So I just played the role of a husband. The porn girl that was hired was playing my wife, and she wasn't supposed to have sex with me. And the girl asked the director, "Hey, he's cute. Can I have sex with him?" And I'm like, "Sweet." And the director says, "Are you tested?" I'm like, "What do you mean tested?" He's like, "You have to get tested." I'm like, "I got tested like a year ago at my annual physical." They're like, "No, no, the porn test. That's like a special DNA HIV test." And I was all upset that I couldn't have sex with this girl who wanted to have sex with me. That was beautiful. So I networked on set, got everybody's phone number, went back to Irvine where I lived, and then I called the testing lab people told me about, and I totally lied and I said, "I was on this porn shoot with Wildlife Video, and the director told me to call you apparently because he wants to use me, and I have to get a test." Totally like made it look like I was not ignorant of what was going on. I was like, "Okay, come on in." So I went in, I got into their model book, and then I started getting calls for shoots. And then I went in, and then I basically at the next shoot I met this guy Chase. It was a bukkake shoot where there's like 100 guys and they all basically masturbate onto a girl's face. And I met this guy Chase who was there, and he knew everybody in the business. He liked me. He introduced me to everybody at the adult film convention because he'd been in the business for so long. People started hiring me. I kind of failed a lot at first because it was a new experience. But then once I really honed my skill after about a year, I was really working consistently and performing consistently as well. And then I did that for probably about 10 years, and got out of the business. I only got out of the business because there's really no more money to be made because there's so much free content. I'm sure anybody all over the world watching this show, nobody pays for content anymore because of all the tube sites and the torrent pirated sites. But that only happened around 2008. Everything before then, people would log into an internet site and pay for a subscription, or they would pay for a DVD or a VHS tape.
Well, we just had a question from somebody who sent me a text message.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a look what we have. Just a minute. Before I get back to that, I want to ask you a couple of other questions. So you said that you didn't have any problem performing.
Well,
Uh,
when I was at the Swingers Club, I was just so happy and excited. When I got to the porn world, initially, there was a lot of light, there were a lot of people. And what I actually did was I knew from the swinging world that, I could only last maybe like 10, 15 minutes before I came.
right.
Um, so what I did is I said, well, let me masturbate before the shoot. That way I'll be able to go longer on the second round. So I told the
Okay.
director to give me like a 2-second heads up,
Right.
and he did. And then I basically took care of myself. And then when the scene started and all the lights came on, all the people standing around, I really knew what was happening. I had no erection, but it was okay though because it was called a boy girl shoot, two guys
Yes.
and a girl. So they just shot my position softcore, and the other
I
guy
have
was
a question.
hardcore on the girl,
Yeah, okay.
and the scene looked
Yeah.
completely seamless. So there was no.
We have a caller on the line. All right, caller, go ahead. State your name and where you calling from. Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, what's your name and where you calling from?
Yes, Mr. Ponder, my name is. I'm calling from Plano, Texas.
And what is your question for Dave?
The question I had, sir, are there any investment opportunities in this business still?
No. Well, it
The
depends.
question I have is, are there any investment opportunities?
Sure. I mean, in content, no. I mean, content is now a commodity. Content is like, trying to sell air conditioning. Like the money to be made now, I think, in adult movies is either in the emerging technology, like 3D virtual sex, where people wear like headsets and they actually feel like they're having sex with the person. There's a large capital upfront cost, to invest in the technology, which prevents other players from entering the market. So there's less competition there. And I think there's a lot to be said now for social media sites that focus around sexuality, where before porn was a fantasy, now it's becoming a reality. You have sites like Ashley Madison that tout have an affair, life is short, and they're basically a dating site like Match.com for having affairs. I think those types of sites, these sort of casual sex sites where people actually meet live to actually have sex, have some potential there, because you can't get that for free. I mean, people are going to pay a fee to join because they're actually getting something tangible out of it. When you think of traditional pornography, you join a site, you pay $30 for content, or you can go to YouPorn and get that same type of content for free. Where if you pay a site to meet other girls that are willing to have sex with you, you can't really get that for free. Or if there are free sites, they're usually inundated with spam and viruses and things like that people don't want to deal with. But generally speaking, I would say no. I mean, like, I got out of the business. I'm not in the business anymore. It's so mainstream. I wrote a book. I did a documentary. That did well. I don't want to write more books. I don't want to write more documentaries. But I would say, there's so many business opportunities out there, just in general, that aren't of an adult nature that I think are more viable. I'd probably pursue those, and then whatever money you make from that, if you're interested in, say sexuality more generally, then just use that to have an enjoyable life.
Well, Dave, the next question I have for you is regarding this risky business. There is a website, riskybusinessthemovie.com. Tell our audience exactly what that is all about.
So, Risky Business is a political and public health documentary that I did about the adult film industry. And the reason I did it is a lot of people, especially in the United States, have an aversion to pornography. And I wouldn't say the people do because they watch it, but the government or the nonprofit groups and things. And they always make, I saw this ABC News story on Belladonna, and I know Belladonna personally, and they made her look like this huge victim and that she was miserable. And that wasn't the case. I mean, she was always calling for work, and she was happy to do scenes. And it was completely a complete misrepresentation of the adult film business. And then CBS did one, I want to say on 60 Minutes, where they showed porn. It was very pro porn. It was like, porn's great, which I think it is, but I think it was a little too great. They didn't really balance it out. There weren't a lot of fair documentaries on porn. They were either porn is really bad documentaries or porn is really good documentaries. So what I did is I made a documentary that I think is kind of similar to Cocaine Cowboys, where we interview a lot of people at the beginning. Everybody's watching it thinking, wow, I want to get into porn, travel, money, sex, girls, etc. And then there's this kind of apex, and then it comes all the way down with STDs and employment discrimination and difficulty finding relationships after you get out of the business, things like that. And then people leave and say, okay, I don't want to do porn. But the idea is in the United States, at least, we have OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which regulates workplace safety. So, for example, if you're a construction worker, the law requires you wear a hard hat. So even if the construction worker says, I feel more comfortable not wearing a hard hat, I don't want to wear a hard hat, he doesn't have a choice. He has to wear a hard hat. It's labor code. In porn, though, however, you can have unprotected sex with a high-risk population. They have high partner counts. A lot of them use drugs. A lot of them escort on the side. And you basically, it's very common to get chlamydia and gonorrhea. Now, HIV, not so much. HIV is more on the gay side of the business. Or if you go to Brazil, the most recent one, there was some performers went to Brazil, had anal sex, down in in with high risk population down in Brazil, brought it back to the United States. Generally speaking, HIV isn't really the primary reason that we need condom use. I think it's more for mitigating chlamydia, gonorrhea, those types of things, reducing the risk of a herpes transmission, things like that. If it was up to me, I think that they should mandate vaccinations for hepatitis A and B because they exist. Hepatitis C isn't really considered sexually transmitted unless you're doing some crazy stuff. They have a Gardasil vaccine, which prevents against most of the strains that we believe cause cervical cancer. The Centers for Disease Control here recommends that for middle school girls. And I think that in Las Vegas, where exotic dancers have to get a license by the state, that in California and Florida or New York, where people shoot adult movies, they should be a porn license. Where if you're a girl and you want to make a movie, you basically go to the licensing board, you get a license, you get your Hep A and B vaccines, you get your Gardasil vaccine, you get tested, you show your ID, and you get a porn license, and then the age verification is then placed on the government and not so much on the individual producers to ensure compliance.
So that brings up an important point. If the girl walks in there with a driver's license and it shows she's 18 years old, it could be fake, but the producer is not responsible.
We have no way of knowing. I mean, right now, I think in my 10, 11 years in the porn business, I think the whole time I've only known later that a girl used a fake ID because it was discovered, and then basically all the producers pulled down the content. You had to notify the authorities, like, show the documents that she presented. But producers aren't cops. We don't know what's a real, a fake versus a real ID. You got to bring two forms of ID. So if you can place that burden onto the state, then we can say, hey, you guys gave her the license. You know what I mean? But it's but again, most people are legit. Nobody in the legitimate adult film industry would ever shoot anybody that's underage. There's this fake, somehow combining regular pornography and child pornography is just as erroneous as combining the food industry with somebody who's doing a criminal act of poisoning candies and giving them to children. One is criminal, one is a legitimate business.
Here is what we would like to do. We'll take a quick break and go ahead and watch the trailer for The Risky Business. You are listening to Global Radio and TV Live, and our featured guest is Dave Pounder. Here is his documentary. Let's take a look.
Porn is one of the largest business enterprises in the United States, with a total market value of over $13 billion a year. In 2007, approximately 25% of all search engine requests on the internet were pornographic in nature. Every day, new aspiring models travel to Los Angeles and Miami with dreams of becoming adult film stars.
I've been in business about a month and a half, and I've made about $20,000.
My primary reasons for doing porn, money, and money.
There's countless interviews out there of me saying, no way, I'm never gonna do it, ever.
Some girls have boyfriends, husbands, who are pressuring them or putting them into porn because they're basically pimping them out.
An ever-increasing risk that performers face is that of contracting sexually transmitted diseases.
The use of condoms has been shown to protect against many STDs.
So it was my personal choice to stay with Wicked because I personally want to use condoms.
We don't push for condom use because we just find the movies don't sell as well.
As a producer, I know that non-condom shoots sell better.
Condom, no condom, it don't matter, because the porn, it just gets your heart beating, your blood racing, your mind going, so it don't matter if there's a condom or not.
As technology moves forward and we have more tests available, we understand some diseases that we didn't know in the past.
You almost feel like you're not even allowed to ask for the test.
You're having unprotected sex with a bunch of different people, a high-risk group, drug users. No, we don't have any health mandate whatsoever. The health department should introduce or sponsor legislation at the state level to mandate testing.
The real problem that we currently have is there are very, very few avenues of communication between the adult entertainment industry and government.
Well, my fight with the school is that while I was teaching, I was not actively being involved in porn.
Companies will always discriminate.
Employers at will have very broad latitude to fire people.
Here's my advice to any new girl coming into business. Do your research.
Well, very interesting. Dave, welcome back to our pretty much last segment, another 20 minutes. Do you find that there is a problem for actors and others in the porn industry to get jobs in the regular fields?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you go to the film's website, riskybusinessthemovie.com, and you click on the law tab, you can just scroll down and you can see a slew of people who have lost their jobs as police officers, as teachers, as a bazillion other professions, merely because their employer found out that once upon a time, not even currently, that they had made an adult movie. And to me, it's completely erroneous. I mean, like here in Florida, the guy that you saw, the bald guy, he was a substitute teacher who was no longer in the adult film business. They found out about it and they fired him. Now, he challenged it and he won. That guy was successful in getting his teaching certification back only because he challenged it. Most people don't challenge it. Meanwhile, there was a judge, I think Giselle Pollock, who was caught 2 or 3 times DUI, driving under the influence of alcohol, putting other people's lives in danger. People die from this act, and she got to keep her job basically. Now she has a job she's no longer a judge, but she got a job at the public defender's office. So here's someone who's violating the law currently in their position, putting other people's lives at risk from a scientific, statistical perspective. And she keeps her job, and even when she loses her job, when she no longer is a judge, gets employed as a public defender. Contrast that with a teacher who did porn back in the day, and not even currently, who doesn't put anybody at risk, and that person loses their job. To me, it doesn't make any sense. Now, a lot of states are starting to adopt what's called lawful off-duty conduct statutes. Here in the United States, states like California, New York, North Dakota, and there's another one, Colorado, have laws that say that if you are working for an employer and you're on your own time, you're not on the clock, and you're not using company property or resources, that they can't fire you or adversely affect your employment situation or not hire you because they found out that you're doing something within the law on your own time, right? So if you are a police officer and you like to hunt, it's lawful in the United States to hunt deer, for example. If the police chief happens to be an animal rights activist and discovers that this police officer is a hunter, he doesn't have the authority to just fire him and say, I don't like that you're a hunter, you're fired, because that statute would protect him. Unless there was some kind of a material conflict of interest. Like if you're working for the pharmaceutical company Pfizer and you're a head of product development and you start dating the head of product development for Eli Lilly, a competitive pharmacy company, then you can be fired because there's a material conflict of interest. But this sort of arbitrary discrimination, I think, is silly, and it's mainly surrounding sexuality, especially here in the United States.
Well, many countries have even much worse restrictions against sex, and perhaps highly hypocritical. And some countries in Europe are much more open to sex than what we are here in the U.S. Based upon your experience, is there any slackening of rule, or are people in America getting a little bit more at ease with sex, and they are approaching it much more differently as the older population is aging and going away, and the younger population is now perhaps different?
Well, I've noticed that tolerance of sexuality is directly correlated to the level of religious influence in a culture. So, for example, if you look at cultures like Afghanistan and Iran, those are highly religious societies and highly sexually restrictive societies. If you look at the most tolerant societies like the Netherlands and Sweden and Denmark and really these Nordic countries in Western Europe, they are the most secular countries. There's very little religion in public policy and in society. If you compare the neighboring countries of Canada and the United States, I mean, the United States is very religious compared to Canada, right? Yet in Canada, prostitution is legal. Pornography is legal. There's no problems with pornography. Actually, the pornography government just complained that they're not shooting enough porn in Canada. They want to shoot more because they're taking jobs away from Canadians by not making porn in Canada. And in the U.S., which is more religious, you have all of these social conservatives that are kind of cracking down on it. Now, thankfully, I think the internet is a great way for young people who are kind of being indoctrinated into these religious doctrines to escape that, to say, is this really the case? And to Google, does God exist? Is it wrong to be an atheist? These types of things, or is sex wrong? And start getting access to academic videos and even talks like this, where people can say, yeah, I knew I was right. I knew there was nothing wrong with sex. I know it's healthy and normal and natural. So thankfully, when you look at the religious data in the United States, most of these, there's less Christians per capita. There's more atheists and non-believers per capita. Interestingly, there are more Muslims per capita now in the United States. But for all other religious groups, they appear to be declining, which I think is good because, like I said, this outdated morality, whether it's surrounding gay marriage, whether it's surrounding abortion, every public health entity in the world realizes the need for safe legal abortion. And the only group that opposes safe legal abortion are religious fundamentalists. There's no other group. There's no public health group that opposes it. There's no economics group that says, oh, it's bad for the economy. It's exclusively this sort of religious group, which claims this sort of moral expertise, which never made sense to me. If I go to Sam Harrison, if I go to a physics conference and there's Sam Whitten, a great physicist, and another great physicist, if I walk into the room and offer my opinion on physics, it really doesn't matter because I'm not qualified to offer an opinion on physics. Everybody's opinion doesn't matter. Yet in the realm of morality, everybody seems to think that like everybody's opinion matters, and that somehow the church is this sort of entity that should set this, and they're getting their ideas out of a whirlwind. I mean, there's no scientific basis to that. If you Jimmy Kimmel, which is a guy here in the U.S., did a parody when Janet Jackson, a popular music performer in the United States, was doing a halftime show at our big Super Bowl. Her breast came out of her top on national television for a fraction of a second, and the American population was up in arms. Oh my God, where's our society going? Meanwhile, they'll take these same kids to watch an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where they're shooting and murdering and raping and pillaging, and there's no problem with that. I see an issue there. And then what Jimmy Kimmel did was, with the analogy, is they said, Al Jazeera television in Iraq is in trouble with the FCC because of a Super Bowl wardrobe malfunction. And they showed all these women in full burqas dancing around, and then a forearm sleeve falls off, exposing their forearm. And the whole Iraq culture freaks out because they're showing the forearm. And the Americans look at that and say, wow, isn't that silly that they have to wear full burqas? I mean, who would want to live like that? Meanwhile, the Europeans are looking at us saying, look at the Americans, the silly Americans, how silly they are, making a big deal over a woman's breast on national television, which is very comparable. I mean, the breast shouldn't even be sexualized. It's there to feed nutrients to babies,
So that brings up another question. Mm-hmm. Is pornography, if watched too many times and spending a lot of time on pornography, will it have any effect on the institution of marriage? Do people who watch porn become more violent with respect to sex? Or is there any evidence that watching porn makes a man worse than what he is?
Well, first of all, watching porn has shown to have no negative consequence on attitudes towards women unless the content is degrading towards women. So if you're watching a movie where it's depicting coercion or coerced sex, forced sex, mass degrading of the woman, calling her bad names, degrading her in that way, that's shown to have negative outcomes. The majority of porn, 95%, is not that porn. The majority of porn is happy couples. The college guy goes to a party and there's a girl that wants to have sex with him. It's all consensual. Everybody's happy. Nobody's being coerced. But the anti-porn people will find the one episode or the outlier of content and try to hold that up as the example. And it's clearly not the case. And I mean, everybody knows now porn is so widespread that if watching porn caused bad attitudes towards women or violence or raping or all these types of things, we would have a much, much worse world today, because if you look even in the U.S. at the top 100 sites, about 10% of them are porn. The top 100 trafficked websites, it goes like Google, Facebook, in the top 100 and plenty in the top 20 are adult sites like YouPorn or RedTube. These sex sites. So if that's the bulk, you should see people raping all day long and firing girls and calling them names, but you don't see that. I mean, it's not what happens. People realize that it's more of a fantasy, and they just do it as a masturbatory aid, basically, to achieve orgasm. And there have been plenty of studies that show that as a society has more internet access and more access to sexual content as an outlet, that sexual violence against women declines, rape declines. All of these things seem to have positive outcomes. And if you go to my bio website, which is pornographyexpert.com, again, pornographyexpert.com, you can read government studies, you can read academic studies that talk about this. Todd Kendall, at Clemson University at the time did a paper called Porn Up, Rape Down. Anthony D'Amato, a law professor at Northwestern University, which is a prestigious university in the U.S., had a similar conclusion. Dan Linz at the University of California at Santa Barbara showed that the degrading effect matters in male attitudes toward females. And there's government studies done in both the United States and the United Kingdom. And the website also has a bunch of academic videos that'll give you the scientific and social science and evolutionary science research behind a lot of what we're saying today to kind of get people to think more normal. And to what we talked about earlier in the show, when there was this true scientific shift from everything revolves around the earth to everything revolves around the sun, and there was a lot of public opposition to that, it's the same thing with relationships. When I say, listen, men are going to cheat, you shouldn't worry about it. Women are concerned about resource growth. Men shouldn't be surprised if they lose their ambition or lose their jobs and their wives decide to exit. It doesn't make women gold diggers and men bad dog losers or jerks. It just makes us men and it makes women women. If you were women, you would do the same thing. If the woman was a man, she would do the same thing. And I think once people understand the science behind it, they'll be a lot more tolerant of these more progressive attitudes towards sexuality.
Now, why do women watch comparatively less porn than men?
Because porn caters to the evolved sexual psychology of men for partner variety. It's the same that your comparative question on the other side is, why do women watch chick flicks and romance novels? Because it caters to them. What do women want? They want a tall, successful, confident man that's personable and funny and humorous and has resources, that is only going to adore and cherish her and only want her and have a family with her and yet have plenty of time with her and still make money. I mean, this is what's depicted. It's not reality. Usually the guy who's making $1 million a year is never home. He's traveling all over the world. He maybe sees his wife a couple times a month. And the guy who's always home to have time with his wife because he works straight 40-hour shifts is probably making $30,000, $40,000 a year. And she doesn't want that either, So it's an unrealistic expectation. And it's the same unrealistic expectation that men have in pornography. They think, wow, there's this young, beautiful girl that allow me to just have sex with her and all her friends and not invest a lot of money in her. And that's not the case either. If you want a high-value female mate, you have to pay the cost of that, which is, this woman can get a man who will take her around the world and take her to nice restaurants and wine her and dine her. And if you are an unattractive woman, you don't really have as many options. So maybe you're willing to put up with the man who won't invest in you or just have as much social status,
Okay.
And it's a market, It's like saying, go ahead.
Let's talk about your books. Now, do you have how many books? I know there is one book that I was able to read through, Obscene Thoughts, a pornographer's perspective in sex, love, and dating. Are there any other books?
No, and the Obscene Thoughts book, you can go to obscenethoughts.com and you can watch videos like this that we're doing, and you can read the academic reviews and the popular reviews. It won the Bronze Award for the Book of the Year award in the psychology category at the American Library Association conference. It has good reviews from Kirkus and Forward Clarion. It was an Amazon bestseller twice. And it really talks about the social and evolutionary psychology of kind of what we're talking about now at this cost of having sex and the reasons why men cheat, why women care, and all this kind of stuff. But it's the only book I wrote. It's the only book I'll ever write. It was much more involved than I thought it would be. Like anything else, you start any business, double the cost, double the time, double the effort. There's so much involved. Same with the documentary. I'm not going to do another documentary. I'm glad I did it, but it's just way too much work. I don't want to be a documentarian. I don't want to be an author. It's just something I want to kind of put out there.
All right, let me ask you this. Are you still working on your PhD?
It's funny you ask. I'm not. I still have. I'm actually 9 credits away from candidacy. Well, 9 credits away from qualifying to take the qualifying exams, which then make me a candidate. But the thing is I kind of went morphed between 2 PhDs, between a media economics and human sexuality and computer science, because that's really my mainstream business background. So what I'm going to do is probably in about 2 years, when I have more free time, I'm going to apply to 9 top evolutionary psychology PhD programs. And I will, at that point, not have all these other demands, and then I will definitely complete it, but it's probably about 2 years away. And then when I get it, I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to be a professor. I'm not going to go, write another book. I mean, I just want the knowledge because I believe in self-development. And then from there, I'll probably...
So in other words, you want to call yourself Dr. Dave Pounder.
Just like Dr. Ravi.
Well, you wouldn't believe it, Dan. The whole hour has passed by so quick. We have only a couple of more minutes left, so at this time what I would like to do is to go ahead and get a somewhat of a comedic perspective on the psychology of men and women. And we are going to close out the show with Dave Chappelle's little conversation there, which I'm going to show. And also, Dave, thank you so much for joining us, and it's been wonderful. I wanted to ask you a lot of other questions, but I guess you need to come back and join us perhaps in the next couple of months or whenever you have some time.
Anytime, I appreciate it.
All right, very good. Please stay on the line. Well, you are listening to Global Radio and TV Live, and I am your host, Dr. Ravi. The number to call is 469-307-1642. It was a fascinating conversation with our featured guest today, Dave Pounder. And what I would like to do next is to go ahead and one of the videos he suggested that we should play to close out this segment, and this is from Dave Chappelle. So enjoy, and we will be right back. And Dave Pounder, please stay on the line.
That's right. Chivalry is dead, and women killed it. There's a fundamental difference in the way we're going to see things. We're not going to see eye to eye on this issue. We're just not. Our tests in life are different. A woman's test in life is material. A man's test in life is a woman. Now, by test, I mean that those are the things that we desire. Men have nice cars, not because they like nice cars, because they know women like nice cars. That's how it goes. Because men are hunters, and the car is the bait. And a woman comes and says, ooh, nice Porsche. Gotcha, bitch.